In the hollow silence after exile, Mira Vale learned to wear her shame like armor. 7 winters she endured their whispers carried on northern winds. Cursed, barren, worthless. 7 years she guarded a secret that burned beneath her heart. A child with golden eyes who could shift beneath the moon before he could even walk. A miracle they said was impossible. A heir to a throne she dared not claim. When Alpha King Riven Drake appeared at her door that fateful night, the walls she had built around her broken heart began to crumble. The touch of his hand brought memories flooding back, of passion, of promises, of a love sacrificed to duty. But the kingdom that once cast her out now desperately needed what only she could provide. A true-blooded successor to prevent civil war. Some curses are spoken by bitter tongues. Others are forged from secrets kept too long in shadow. As the blood moon rises over Crescent Mountain, Mira must decide, will she remain in exile or step into the light to reclaim not just her place in the pack, but perhaps the heart of the king who never knew he had a son? Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The scent of bitter herbs filled Mira's small cottage as she crushed dried rosemary between her fingers, letting the fragments fall into the steaming pot. Outside, the forest whispered secrets to the night, branches swaying in the autumn wind. She had grown accustomed to these whispers over the 7 years of her exile. They were better company than the memories of sneering faces and cruel laughter that had followed her from the Heartpack territories. "You're cursed and barren," they had laughed. The words no longer stung as they once had, but they echoed in the empty spaces of her home all the same. A small cough from the back room pulled her attention away from the brew. Mira wiped her hands on her worn apron and moved quietly across the wooden floor, pausing at the doorway to observe the small figure nestled beneath a patchwork quilt. "Mama?" came the drowsy voice. "Is it morning yet?" Mira smiled, the expression softening the sharp angles of her face. At 32, the years had been both cruel and kind to her, lines of hardship etched around her eyes, yet strength evident in every movement. "No, my little wolf. The moon is still high." She crossed to the bed and placed a cool hand on her son's forehead. "Your fever's breaking." Ash blinked up at her with eyes too knowing for a child of 6. Eyes the color of burnished gold with flecks of amber that caught the candlelight. They were his father's eyes, though Ash would never know that. To him, his father was a brave soldier who had died before his birth. A kinder truth than reality. "Can I shift tomorrow?" he asked hopefully. "I feel the wolf inside, scratching." Mira's heart clenched. "Not yet. Remember our rule?" Ash sighed dramatically. "No shifting where anyone might see, only deep in our secret place." "That's right." She tucked the blanket around his thin shoulders. "And only when I'm with you." Even at 6, Ash understood the danger. A child who could fully shift before the age of 10 was unheard of, and his wolf was no ordinary cub. Silver white, with markings that spoke of royal bloodlines, it would raise too many questions if seen, questions that might lead dangerous people to their door. "Tell me about the Heartpack again," he whispered, eyes already drooping with sleep. "About the castle on the mountain." Mira settled beside him, running her fingers through his dark hair. The Heartpack's fortress sits at the center of the 5 territories, carved into the living rock of Crescent Mountain. From its towers, you can see all 5 valleys stretching out like the fingers of a hand. She continued the familiar tale until his breathing deepened. These stories were all she could give him of his heritage, sanitized versions that left out the pain and betrayal, tales of a homeland they could never return to. A sudden howl pierced the night, much closer than the usual forest wolves. Mira stiffened, her own wolf stirring beneath her skin in recognition. That was no ordinary wolf. That was a shifter, a pack wolf. She moved silently to the window, peering through the cracked shutters at the tree line. Nothing moved in the silvery moonlight, but her senses told her they were not alone. After years of isolation, with only occasional visits from the human villagers seeking her remedies, the presence of another shifter could only mean trouble. Mira grabbed her shawl and slipped outside, careful to lock the door behind her. The autumn air bit through her thin clothes as she circled the cottage, searching for signs of the intruder. The scent hit her before she saw him. Male, powerful, and unmistakably alpha. "You're trespassing," she called into the darkness, her voice stronger than she felt. "This land is under my protection." A low chuckle answered her. followed by the sound of twigs snapping underfoot. From the shadows emerged a man so tall he seemed to block out the moonlight behind him. His shoulders were broad, his stance that of a warrior accustomed to command. Even in human form, there was something distinctly lupine about the way he moved, predatory grace in every step. "Protection," he said, voice deep and smooth as river stones. "One lone omega against whoever might wander by. Brave, but foolish." Mira felt her wolf bristle at the condescension. 7 years ago, she might have lowered her eyes at an alpha's approach. Now, she held her ground. "I've managed just fine until now. State your business or leave." The man stepped closer, into a patch of moonlight that illuminated his features. Mira's breath caught in her throat. Time had changed him. A scar now bisected his left eyebrow, and lines of authority marked his face. But those eyes were unchanged. Burnished gold with flecks of amber. Ash's eyes. "You don't recognize me," he said. Not a question, but an observation tinged with something like disappointment. "I suppose 7 years is a long time, even for our kind." But she did recognize him. How could she not? Riven Drake. Once the second son of the former Alpha King. Now, judging by the royal markings on his leather armor, the Alpha King himself, and the father of her child. "I know exactly who you are," Mira replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Alpha King Riven Drake of the Heart Pack. The question remains, what are you doing at my door in the middle of the night?" His eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing her. "You have a reputation, healer. They say you work miracles with herbs and magic where others fail." "They exaggerate," she said flatly. "I'm a simple healer, nothing more. Simple healers don't get exiled from the Heart Pack." He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Nor do they hide away in forests at the edge of pack territories. Mira crossed her arms, a feeble barrier between them. "Perhaps I prefer the solitude." "No wolf prefers solitude," Riven countered. "We are pack creatures by nature. Some of us adapt when necessary." She glanced back at the cottage, anxiety crawling up her spine with every moment she stood outside. If Ash woke and came looking for her. "It's late, Alpha King. Whatever you want, it can wait until morning." "It cannot." His tone shifted, urgency bleeding through the authority. "I have wounded men. 3 of them, in a camp 2 miles south. Arrow wounds festering with a poison our healers can't identify." Mira hesitated. Turning away those in need went against her nature, but letting Riven anywhere near her home, near Ash, was too dangerous. "Tell me their symptoms," she said finally. "I'll prepare what they need and bring it to your camp at first light. They may not survive until first light. Then they should have sought help sooner." She turned away, intent on returning to the cottage. A strong hand gripped her arm, not painful but unyielding. Mira felt a jolt of awareness at the contact, her traitorous body responding to the touch of her wolf's true mate, even after all these years. "I'm not asking, healer." Riven's voice was low, dangerous. "These are my men, my responsibility. You will come now and do what you can for them." Mira pulled free of his grasp, fury momentarily overriding caution. "You forget yourself, Alpha King. We're not in your territories. Here, I answer to no one, least of all you." Something flashed in his golden eyes. Respect, perhaps, or surprise at her defiance. Few would dare speak to him thus. 1 hour, he said after a tense silence. "Come for 1 hour. Bring your supplies. I'll have you back before dawn, and compensate you generously for your trouble." Mira's mind raced. If she refused outright, he might grow suspicious, or worse, force the issue. If she went quickly, treated his men, and returned, Ash would likely sleep through the night undisturbed. "Wait here," she said finally. "I need to gather my supplies." Inside, Mira moved with controlled panic, collecting herbs and tinctures with shaking hands. She checked on Ash, still sleeping soundly, and left a note beside his bed in case he woke. "Gone to help someone sick. Stay inside. Back by sunrise." She hesitated, then added a drop of sleeping tincture to his water cup, just enough to ensure he wouldn't wake and wander while she was gone. When she emerged, bag of supplies in hand, Riven waited exactly where she'd left him. "Lead the way," she said, pulling up her hood. 1 hour, Alpha King, not a minute more. The journey through the forest was swift, Riven setting a pace that would have exhausted a human, but was manageable for wolfkind. Even an Omega like herself, they traveled in silence, Mira keeping a careful distance between them. Questions burned in her mind. Why was the Alpha King himself fetching a healer? Why these woods, so far from the Heartpack's center of power? The camp, when they reached it, was small and well concealed. 4 tents arranged around a fire pit, where embers glowed dimly. 2 soldiers stood guard, snapping to attention when Riven approached. "At ease," he commanded. "This is the healer." Mira followed him to the largest tent, ducking inside to find 3 men on pallets, their faces drawn with pain. The stench of festering wounds filled the enclosed space. "Arrow wounds, you said?" She moved to the nearest man, already rolling up her sleeves. "Ambushed 3 days ago on the eastern border," Riven confirmed. "Rouge wolves from the Claw Pack, we think." Mira examined the first wound, an angry red gash where an arrow had been removed from the man's shoulder. Black veins spread outward from the entry point. She recognized the poison immediately. "Nightshade mixed with wolfsbane," she murmured, opening her bag. "Designed specifically to kill our kind." Riven's expression darkened. "Can you counteract it?" "Yes." She began mixing herbs with practiced efficiency. "But I need to know why the Alpha King is skulking through forests with a small contingent instead of commanding from his fortress. These are assassination wounds. Someone wanted you dead." Their eyes met across the tent, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "Civil war is brewing," he said simply. "The old Alpha King's death has complicated matters." Mira's hands stilled. "Your father is dead?" She hadn't heard. News traveled slowly to her isolated cottage. 2 months ago. "And now you wear his crown." It wasn't a question. "Not everyone is pleased with the succession, I take it. My elder brother believed the throne should be his." Riven's expression remained neutral, but Mira caught the flicker of pain behind his eyes. "Dominic has always been ambitious, but I never thought he would resort to this." Mira returned to her work, applying poultices to the wounded men and administering tinctures. She moved with quiet efficiency, aware of Riven's eyes following her every movement. "Your skills have improved," he observed. "You were talented before, but this 7 years is a long time." She echoed his earlier words. "I've had ample opportunity to practice." 7 years, he repeated softly. "You disappeared without a word." Mira's hands clenched around the bottle she was holding. "I was exiled, Alpha King, by your father's decree, with your brother's enthusiastic support. Or have you conveniently forgotten? I was fighting border skirmishes in the north. By the time I returned, you were gone." His voice had lost its commanding edge, something almost like regret coloring his tone. "They said you'd failed to produce an heir for your husband, and he had cast you aside." "And so I had," she responded coldly. "A barren Omega is of no use to the pack. Isn't that what they said? A curse upon the bloodline." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Mira finished treating the last soldier, packing away her supplies with swift, angry movements. "They'll recover," she said, standing. "Change the poultices twice daily. Give them the tincture every 6 hours. They should be well enough to travel within 3 days." She moved toward the tent opening, but Riven blocked her path. "The night we spent together," he said quietly, "before your marriage to Harris, did it mean nothing to you?" Mira's heart thundered in her chest. One night of weakness before her arranged marriage to a man she didn't love. One night that had given her ash. "It was a mistake," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. "One I paid for dearly." Something flashed in his eyes. Hurt, quickly masked by the return of his alpha authority. "I'll escort you back." "That won't be necessary," Mira insisted. "I know these woods better than you. These aren't ordinary times," Riven countered. "If my brother's assassins found us once, they could be watching still." Logic won out over her desire to put distance between them. They left the camp in silence, retracing their steps through the moonlit forest. Mira's mind raced ahead to the cottage, to Ash sleeping innocently, unaware that his father walked beside her. They were halfway back when Riven suddenly stiffened, grabbing her arm to halt her mid-stride. "Someone's been to your cottage," he said, voice low and dangerous. "I can smell them." Fear clutched at Mira's heart. How many? At least 2. He was already moving, faster now, his human form blurring as he prepared to shift. Mira matched his pace, terror lending her speed. The cottage came into view, door hanging open, light spilling onto the ground outside. A scream built in her throat, but she swallowed it down. 2 figures emerged from the cottage, dragging a small, struggling form between them. Ash, kicking and fighting against his captors. "Mama!" he cried, voice carrying through the night air. One of the intruders cuffed him roughly. "Shut up, pup." Something snapped inside Mira. 7 years of hiding, of caution, of teaching Ash to suppress his true nature, all of it vanished in an instant. Her wolf rose to the surface, bones cracking as she shifted faster than she had in years, clothing shredding as silver-gray fur erupted across her body. Beside her, Riven had also shifted, his massive black wolf form nearly twice her size. They launched forward in unison, covering the distance to the cottage in seconds. Mira took down the first intruder, teeth finding purchase in the vulnerable flesh of his throat. The taste of blood filled her mouth as she tore through skin and muscle. The man hadn't even had time to shift. The second intruder dropped Ash, turning to face the new threat. Recognition flashed in his eyes as he took in Riven's massive form, the distinctive markings of the Alpha King unmistakable even in wolf form. "It's him!" he shouted. "The king!" His words ended in a gurgle as Riven's jaws closed around his neck. Mira shifted back to human form, heedless of her nakedness, and rushed to Ash. He was trembling but unharmed, eyes wide with shock. "Mama," he whispered, "you said never to shift where others could see. It's okay, little wolf," she soothed, gathering him close. "You're safe now." The sound of bones cracking drew her attention. Riven had shifted back, his massive human form silhouetted against the night sky. He grabbed a blanket from the porch and tossed it to her before pulling on his own discarded pants. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, gaze moving from her to Ash. "We're fine," Mira said, wrapping the blanket around herself and Ash. They were searching for something. Not something. Riven's eyes fixed on Ash with unsettling intensity. "Someone." Mira pushed Ash behind her protectively. "How did they find us?" "They must have followed me." His expression darkened with self-recrimination. "This is my fault." He moved toward them, but Mira backed away, keeping herself between him and Ash. "Mama?" Ash's voice was small. "Who is he?" Before she could answer, Ash stepped out from behind her, his gaze locked on Riven's face. Even in the dim light, the resemblance was undeniable. The same golden eyes, the same proud set of the jaw. Riven went utterly still, his eyes widening as he took in the child's features. Understanding dawned across his face, followed by something Mira couldn't interpret. Wonder, perhaps, or disbelief. "You said I was barren," Mira whispered, tears threatening. "You all said I was cursed." Riven knelt slowly, bringing himself to Ash's eye level. "What's your name, pup?" he asked, voice gentler than Mira had ever heard it. "Ash," the boy answered, chin lifted in a gesture so like his father's that Mira's heart ached. "Ash Vale. How old are you, Ash?" 6, he answered proudly. "Almost 7. Riven's gaze moved to Mira, calculations visible in his expression. 7 years since their night together. 7 years since she'd been exiled. "He's mine," Riven said softly. Not a question, but a realization. Mira pulled Ash closer. "He's mine," she corrected fiercely. "Mine alone." Riven stood, his expression unreadable. "We need to leave. Now. If these two found you, others won't be far behind." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Mira insisted. "Mama," Ash tugged at her blanket. "There are more people coming. I can hear them." In the distance, the sound of howls confirmed his words. Multiple wolves, closing in. "They're hunting for him," Riven said urgently. "For the heir to the Alpha throne." The weight of his words settled over Mira like a stone. The heir. Of course, that's how Riven would see him. Not as her son, but as his heir, his bloodline, his legacy. "We'll run," she said desperately. "We've hidden before. We can—" "Not from this," Riven cut her off. "Not from what's coming." The howls grew louder, more insistent. "Trust me," Riven said, extending his hand. "Just this once, Mira. Trust me to keep you both safe." Mira looked at the cottage that had been their sanctuary, at the bodies of the men who had tried to take her son, at Ash's frightened face, and finally at Riven, the man who had unknowingly given her both her greatest joy and her deepest fear. "We'll need supplies," she said at last. "And clothes." Riven nodded, quickly. As they gathered essentials, Mira felt the foundations of her carefully constructed life crumbling beneath her. 7 years of secrets, of safety, gone in an instant. Now they would return to the Heart Pack, to a world that had cast her out. to dangers she had fled. The curse was never on her womb as they had claimed. Perhaps it had been on her heart all along. The journey to the heart-packed territories took 3 days, each hour stretching Mira's nerves thinner. They traveled through hidden paths and ancient tunnels known only to the royal bloodline, routes Riven insisted were safer than the main roads where his brother's spies might lurk. Ash, despite the danger, thrived in the adventure. His eyes widened at every new sight, his questions endless. For a child raised in isolation, the world beyond their cottage was a revelation. Mira watched him with a mixture of pride and terror as he absorbed everything around him, especially his father's every move. "Can you teach me to track like that?" Ash asked Riven on the second day, after watching him identify a deer's trail through seemingly impossible terrain. Riven's expression softened, a transformation Mira had observed happening more frequently when he interacted with his newly discovered son. "Of course. Every alpha needs to know how to read the forest." Mira stiffened at his words. "Ash, gather more firewood for our camp," she instructed, waiting until the boy was out of earshot before turning to Riven. "He's not your heir. Not officially. Remember that." Riven straightened, tension returning to his shoulders. "He has royal blood. My blood. You can't change that by hiding him away." "I wasn't hiding him," Mira hissed. "I was protecting him." "From what? From me?" Hurt flashed across Riven's face before his expression hardened again. "You never even told me he existed. And if I had? What then?" Mira challenged. "I was married to another man when he was conceived. I was exiled for barrenness while carrying your child. What justice would there have been for either of us?" Riven's jaw tightened. "You could have come to me. You weren't there." The words escaped before she could stop them, years of buried pain surfacing. "You were away fighting border skirmishes, remember? Your father was dying, your brother was consolidating power, and I was nothing but damaged goods. A failed Omega who couldn't give her husband an heir. That's exactly how they saw me." Mira cut him off. "The elders laughed when they sentenced me to exile. 'Cursed and barren,' they called me, while your child grew inside me." Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of Ash gathering sticks. Riven's expression shifted through anger, regret, and finally settled into something resembling resolve. "Things are different now," he said quietly. "I'm Alpha King. And that's supposed to change everything?" Mira laughed bitterly. "Your brother is trying to kill you. There's civil war brewing. The Heart Pack is divided. Into that chaos, you want to introduce a 6-year-old boy as your heir? He'd be a target for every ambitious wolf in the territories." Before Riven could respond, Ash returned, arms full of firewood. The conversation fell away, but Mira felt Riven's eyes on her throughout the evening, weighted with unspoken words. That night, as Ash slept between them beneath the stars, Riven spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Mira turned to face him across their sleeping child. "For what?" "For not being there. For not knowing. For all of it." In the moonlight, his features seemed softer, the Alpha King facade slipping to reveal the man beneath. "If I had known about him, nothing would have kept me away." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. It matters to me," he insisted. "And it will matter to Ash when he's old enough to understand." Mira watched the gentle rise and fall of her son's chest, his face peaceful in sleep. "What will you tell him? That his mother lied? That his father never wanted him?" "I would never tell him that," Riven said fiercely, "because it isn't true. I want him now. I've wanted him since the moment I realized he was mine." The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver through her. Wanting isn't enough. He needs protection, guidance. He needs stability. "I can give him all those things." "Can you?" she challenged. "When your own brother wants you dead?" Riven's expression darkened. "Dominic will be dealt with. And then what? You install Ash as your heir and expect the Pax to accept it? An illegitimate child born to an exiled Omega? You underestimate my authority," Riven said, a hint of his alpha power coloring his tone. "And you underestimate him. I've seen how quick he is, how strong. He shifted fully at what age? 5? 4, Mira admitted reluctantly. "But that's precisely why we need to be careful. He's special, Riven. Different. If the wrong people discovered what he can do, all the more reason he belongs under my protection," Riven interrupted. "At the heart of the pack, not hiding in the shadows. Mira fell silent, unable to argue against the logic even as her heart rebelled against the idea. Returning to the Heart Pack meant facing those who had mocked and exiled her. It meant subjecting Ash to politics and danger. It meant sharing him with Riven, a prospect that filled her with both relief and resentment. "Get some sleep," Riven said eventually. "We cross into Heart territory tomorrow. You'll need your strength." The following afternoon, they crested a hill to find Crescent Mountain rising before them, its distinctive curved peak splitting the sky like a silver fang. At its base sprawled the beginnings of Heart Pack territory, forests giving way to rolling meadows and eventually the first outlying settlements. Ash gasped at the sight. "It's just like in your stories, Mama." Mira swallowed hard, memories flooding back. This had been home once, before exile, before shame, before the long, lonely years in the forest cottage. "It's beautiful," she admitted, unable to deny the truth despite everything. "It's yours," Riven said quietly. "Both of you, if you want it." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. 4 riders appeared on the road below, the royal insignia visible on their armor even from a distance. "Your men?" Mira asked tensely. Riven nodded, raising his hand in a signal. "My personal guard. I sent word ahead when we stopped at the river crossing." The riders approached swiftly, dismounting with practiced efficiency. Their captain, a powerfully built woman with a severe expression, dropped to one knee before Riven. "My king," she said formally, before her eyes shifted to Mira and widened slightly in recognition. "Lady Vale." Mira flinched at the title she hadn't heard in 7 years. "Captain Serra," she acknowledged, surprised the woman remembered her. Captain Serra's gaze moved to Ash, who stood tall beside Mira, his chin lifted in unconscious mimicry of Riven's regal posture. Something like shock flickered across her features before she smoothed her expression. "We've secured the fortress as ordered, my king," she reported, returning her attention to Riven. "Loyal forces hold all key positions. Your brother has retreated to the Eastern Valley with his supporters." "And the elders?" Riven asked. "Divided," Serra admitted. "Many remain neutral, awaiting developments." The significant look she gave Ash made Mira step closer to her son protectively. "We ride for the fortress immediately," Riven decided. "Lady Vale and the boy will accompany me in the royal carriage. Your men will form escort." "The royal carriage?" Mira questioned as they descended toward the waiting entourage. "Is that wise? It draws attention." "Precisely," Riven said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "We enter openly, with nothing to hide. To sneak in would suggest weakness or shame, and I will have neither." The royal carriage was as imposing as Mira remembered, carved from dark wood with silver fittings, pulled by 4 white horses. The Heart Pack symbol, a wolf with a crescent moon, adorned its doors. Ash climbed in eagerly, eyes wide as he explored the velvet seats and peered out the windows. Mira hesitated at the door, suddenly overwhelmed by what lay ahead. "Second thoughts?" Riven asked quietly from behind her. "1,000 of them," she admitted. "What happens when we arrive? When people see him? When they see me?" Riven's hand came to rest at the small of her back, warm and solid. "They see what I want them to see. The return of the Alpha King with his heir. Nothing more. And what am I in this tableau? The disgraced Omega? The King's mistress?" His eyes darkened. "You are the mother of the future Alpha King. No one will dare disrespect you, or they answer to me." The possessive note in his voice sent an unwelcome thrill through her. 7 years had not dimmed the connection between them, that invisible thread that had drawn them together for one forbidden night, that had created the miracle now bouncing impatiently on the carriage seats. The journey through Heart Pack territory was surreal. Villages that had once been familiar now seemed changed, though whether they had transformed or she had, Mira couldn't be certain. People stopped to stare as the royal procession passed, whispers following in their wake. As they approached the fortress, Ash pressed his face against the window, awestruck by the massive stone structure rising from the mountainside. Carved directly into Crescent Mountain, the Heart Pack fortress was both natural wonder and architectural marvel, a seamless blending of cave systems and constructed halls, with towers and balconies protruding from the rock face. "It's bigger than I told you," Mira said softly, watching his reaction. "Isn't it?" He nodded, speechless for perhaps the first time in his young life. The The carriage passed through 3 separate checkpoints before entering the main courtyard, where a reception party awaited. Mira recognized several faces among the gathered officials and nobles, some who had once been friends, others who had turned their backs when she was exiled. When the carriage door opened, Riven stepped out first, his presence commanding immediate attention. The assembled crowd dropped to one knee in practiced unison. "My king," they murmured. He turned, extending his hand to help Mira descend. The whispers intensified as she emerged, recognition and shock rippling through the crowd. The exile! Lady Vale! Wasn't she barren? The last whisper reached her sensitive ears, making her flinch. Riven's hand tightened around hers, a silent reminder of his support. Then Ash appeared in the carriage doorway, and the whispers died completely, replaced by stunned silence. Even to those who had never seen Riven as a child, the resemblance was unmistakable. The royal bloodline was written in every feature of Ash's face, in the proud set of his small shoulders, in the golden eyes that surveyed the courtyard with innocent curiosity. "My loyal subjects," Riven's voice carried effortlessly across the courtyard, "I present to you Lady Mira Vale, returned from her long absence. And this," his hand came to rest on Ash's shoulder, "is Ash Vale, my son and heir." The pronouncement fell like a stone into still water, ripples of reaction spreading outward. Some faces registered shock, others calculation. A few, Mira noted with unease, displayed open hostility. An elderly man stepped forward from the crowd, leaning heavily on a gnarled wooden staff. Elder Thaddeus, head of the Council of Elders, one of those who had laughed as they pronounced her cursed and barren. "This is unexpected, my king," he said, voice creaking with age but eyes sharp as they assessed Ash. "The council was not informed of an heir." "I was not informed of one myself until recently," Riven replied smoothly. "Lady Vale and I have much to discuss with the council, but first, we require rest from our journey." His tone made it clear the matter was not open for discussion. Still, Mira caught the significant glances exchanged among the elders present. This revelation would not go unchallenged. "Of course, my king." Elder Thaddeus bowed stiffly. "The royal apartments have been prepared as always." Riven nodded dismissal, and the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered, stealing glances at Ash. Mira fought the urge to shield him from their scrutiny. Inside the fortress, Mira was struck by how little had changed. The same tapestries hung on the stone walls, depicting the history of the Heart Pack. The same scent of pine and mountain air permeated the hallways, yet she felt like a stranger now, out of place in corridors she had once known intimately. Ash, by contrast, looked as though he belonged. He walked beside Riven, unconsciously matching his stride, absorbing every detail with bright-eyed interest. Guards and servants bowed as they passed, their curious gazes lingering on the boy. "Your old chambers have been reopened," Riven informed her as they reached the royal wing. "They connect to mine through the shared sitting room." Mira tensed. "I would prefer separate accommodations." "Impossible," he said flatly. "Ash's safety is paramount. These are the most secure rooms in the fortress, with guards I personally trust. Besides," his expression softened slightly, "it will be easier for him to adjust if we are both nearby." Before she could argue further, the massive oak doors to the royal apartment swung open. A middle-aged woman with a kind face waited inside, her hands clasped before her. "Lady Vale," she curtsied deeply, "it brings joy to my heart to see you return to us." Mira stared in surprise. "Nora, you're still here? Where else would I be?" The woman smiled warmly. "I've served the royal household for 30 years and plan to serve 30 more." Nora had been Mira's lady's maid during her brief time as Harris's wife, one of the few who had shown her genuine kindness. Seeing her familiar face eased something in Mira's chest. Perhaps not everything here was a threat. "And this must be young Master Ash," Nora continued, her eyes twinkling as she regarded the boy. "The spitting image of his father, if I may be so bold." Ash preened slightly at the comparison, making Riven's lips twitch in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Nora will show you to your chambers," he said. "I must meet with my generals immediately. We'll dine together at sunset." He departed with a swirl of his cloak, leaving Mira alone with Ash and Nora in the opulent sitting room. As soon as the doors closed behind him, Mira sank onto a nearby chair, the weight of their situation suddenly overwhelming. "Breathe, my lady," Nora said gently, moving to pour a glass of water. "It's a lot to take in, I know." "He just announced him as his heir," Mira said, voice barely above a whisper. "In front of everyone, Just like that. The king has always been decisive, Nora remarked. And from what I hear, time is not a luxury he can afford with Lord Dominic gathering forces. Ash had wandered to the window, pressing his hands against the glass as he gazed out at the magnificent view of the valleys below. Mama, you can see all 5 territories from here, just like in your stories. Mira forced a smile. So you can. Why don't you explore the chambers with Nora while I rest for a moment? As they disappeared into the adjoining rooms, Mira buried her face in her hands. Everything was moving too quickly. 7 years of careful isolation shattered in an instant. Now Ash was the declared heir to the Alpha throne, a position that painted a target on his back, even as it offered him birthright and privilege. And Riven had stepped back into her life as though the years between had been nothing, bringing with him all the complicated feelings she had tried so hard to bury: anger at his absence when she needed him most, gratitude for his protection now. Attraction that had never truly faded, despite everything. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She tensed, half expecting another elder or noble come to question Ash's legitimacy. Instead, when she opened it, she found a young woman in healer's robes, her dark hair braided severely away from her face. Lady Vale, the woman bowed. I'm healer Lyra. The king sent me to ensure you and the young heir are well after your journey. Mira relaxed slightly at the mention of another healer. We're fine, thank you, just tired. Nevertheless, I've been instructed to examine the boy. Lyra persisted. Royal protocol, especially given his unusual circumstances. Something in the woman's tone made Mira wary. What unusual circumstances? His age of first shift, Lyra said carefully. The king mentioned it was remarkably early. Such things are of interest to the royal healers. Ice formed in Mira's stomach. Of course, Riven would have mentioned Ash's precocious abilities to others. Of course, they would be interested. He's resting now. She lied smoothly. Perhaps tomorrow. Lyra's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes hardened slightly. The king was most insistent. And I am his mother, Mira replied, authority entering her voice. He will be examined when I deem it appropriate, not before. They stared at each other, a silent battle of wills, before Lyra finally inclined her head. As you wish, Lady Vale. I shall inform the king of your concerns. After she departed, Mira closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. She needed to speak with Riven immediately about what information about Ash was being shared. This was precisely why she had hesitated to return. Their son was already being viewed as something to study, to quantify, to use. She found Ash in what was to be his bedroom, bouncing experimentally on the massive 4-poster bed while Nora unpacked the few belongings they had brought. Can I explore the fortress, Mama? He asked eagerly. Nora says there's a training yard where the soldiers practice fighting. Not alone, Mira said firmly. Not yet. We need to learn the lay of the land first. Disappointment clouded his features. But we're safe here, aren't we? Father said... Your father! Mira interrupted, still unused to hearing Ash refer to Riven that way. Doesn't know everything. Promise me you won't wander off alone. Ash sighed dramatically. I promise. Good. She ruffled his hair. Now, shall we prepare for dinner? I hear the royal chef makes apple tarts that taste like magic. His eyes lit up at the prospect of treats, momentarily distracted from thoughts of exploration. As promised, they dined with Riven at sunset in a private dining room adjacent to the royal apartments. The table was laden with more food than the 3 of them could possibly consume. Roasted venison, fresh bread, mountain berries, and yes, apple tarts glistening with sugar. Ash attacked the feast with enthusiasm, his table manners temporarily forgotten in the face of such bounty. Mira watched him fondly, realizing how limited their resources had been in the cottage. Here, at least, he would never want for anything material. The fortress is secure, Riven informed her as they ate. Dominic's forces remain in the Eastern Valley, but he's sent envoys requesting a meeting. He knows about Ash? Mira asked quietly. The news is spreading through all 5 territories by now, Riven confirmed. My brother will have heard. And his response? Remains to be seen. Riven took a sip of wine, his expression carefully neutral. But he cannot challenge a true heir of royal blood. The laws of succession are clear. Laws can be interpreted, Mira said darkly, especially by those who stood to inherit before Ash's existence was known. Riven's eyes flashed. Any who challenge my son's right will answer to me. Father, Ash piped up suddenly, oblivious to the tension. Can I learn to fight with a sword like your soldiers? I saw them practicing in the yard from my window. Riven's expression softened immediately. Of course. Every prince must know how to defend himself and his pack. Prince, Ash repeated, testing the word. Am I really a prince now? You always were, Riven said seriously. You just didn't know it yet. The simple truth of his words made Mira's throat tighten. Whatever else might happen, whatever dangers lay ahead, Riven had acknowledged Ash fully, publicly, without reservation. In that, at least, she could not fault him. After dinner, when Ash had finally exhausted himself and fallen asleep in his new chambers, Mira found Riven on the balcony overlooking the valleys, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Your healer came by earlier, she said without preamble, asking to examine Ash, mentioning his early shifting. Riven turned to face her, moonlight casting his features in silver and shadow. Lyra is discreet and loyal. That's not the point. Mira crossed her arms. You told others about his abilities without consulting me. My healers need to know, he said reasonably. His training will require specialized guidance. His training? She repeated. You've been planning this already? Of course. Riven looked surprised at her reaction. He's my heir, Mira, the future Alpha King. His education must begin immediately. Combat, strategy, pack law, diplomacy. He's 6 years old. He's a royal wolf with abilities that manifest years ahead of normal development, Riven countered. Ignoring that won't change it. Mira turned away, frustration building. This is exactly what I feared. You see him as an asset, a tool for your legacy. I see him as my son, Riven said sharply, moving to stand beside her at the balcony rail. My blood, my responsibility, everything I do is to secure his future. By thrusting him into pack politics before he's even lost his baby teeth? By preparing him for the reality of his birth, Riven insisted. You can't shield him forever, Mira. The world will find him whether you're ready or not. Better he faces it armed with knowledge and skill than protected by nothing but your fear. The truth in his words stung. Hadn't the attack on their cottage proven exactly that? Her careful isolation hadn't kept Ash safe in the end. I don't want to lose him, she admitted, voice barely audible. Riven's hand covered hers on the stone railing, warm and solid. You won't, but you must share him. With me, with the pack, with his destiny. Destiny. Such a weighty word for small shoulders. Yet when she thought of Ash, his confidence, his curiosity, his innate leadership even at 6, perhaps it wasn't so ill-fitting after all. One condition, she said finally. I oversee all of it. His training, his education, his public appearances. Nothing happens without my approval. Riven studied her for a long moment before nodding. Agreed. We do this together. The word together lingered between them, heavy with implication. Standing beside him in the moonlight, the fortress spread out below and the valleys beyond, Mira felt something shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. The peace of the moment shattered with the arrival of Captain Sarah, her expression grave as she approached and bowed. My king, Lady Vale. She acknowledged them both. I bring news from our scouts. Lord Dominic has called the Blood Moon Council. Riven tensed beside her. When? 3 days hence, at the Sacred Circle. Sarah hesitated. He demands the presence of the heir, to confirm his legitimacy before all 5 pack leaders. Mira's blood ran cold. The Blood Moon Council was ancient tradition, a gathering of all pack leaders and elders under the red moon to settle matters of succession or grave import. It could not be refused without breaking pack law. He means to challenge him publicly, she whispered, to humiliate us, or worse. Riven's face had hardened into the mask of the Alpha King, all traces of the man she had glimpsed moments ago vanishing beneath cold authority. Let him try, he said, voice deadly calm. The blood moon works both ways. If he challenges my heir's legitimacy and fails, he forfeits all claim to succession himself. And if something goes wrong? Mira demanded. If they demand proof we cannot provide. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Riven's features. Then we must ensure nothing goes wrong. The Blood Moon Council will recognize Ash as my true heir, or there will be war. The weight of the declaration settled over them like a shroud. 3 days to prepare Ash for a ceremony older than the fortress itself. 3 days before he would stand before the United Packs and be judged. The curse that had supposedly tainted Mira's womb had been proven false with Ash's existence, but perhaps a different curse awaited them, one of blood and birthright and ancient magic stirring beneath the coming red moon. The night of the Blood Moon Council arrived with a sky-stained crimson, clouds parting as if by command to reveal the massive red orb hanging low over Crescent Mountain. Mira stood at the window of Ash's chambers, watching the eerie light spill across the 5 valleys, transforming the familiar landscape into something ancient and primal. "Is it time?" Ash's voice came from behind her, small but steady. Mira turned to find her son dressed in the ceremonial attire Riven had commissioned, a miniature version of royal armor, black leather accented with silver, the heart pack symbol embossed on the chest. His dark hair had been neatly combed, emphasizing the strong lines of his face, so like his father's. At 6 years old, standing straight-backed and solemn-eyed, he looked every inch a prince. Almost. Mira knelt before him, adjusting his collar needlessly. "Remember what we practiced?" Ash nodded seriously. "I stand tall. I speak clearly. I answer only the questions Father said they might ask." He recited their instructions perfectly, then lowered his voice. "And I don't shift unless Father gives the signal." Mira's heart clenched. The last part had been Riven's addition to their preparations, one that had sparked fierce argument between them. Ash's ability to fully shift at such a young age was unprecedented, proof of his royal bloodline, but also potentially dangerous knowledge in the wrong hands. Riven believed demonstrating this power would silence any doubts about Ash's legitimacy. Mira feared it would mark him as something to be either weaponized or destroyed. "That's right," she confirmed, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from his shoulders. "And remember, no matter what happens tonight, your father and I will protect you." "I'm not scared," Ash declared, though the slight tremor in his hands betrayed him. Mira pulled him into a tight embrace. "Of course not. You're the bravest wolf I know." The door opened, admitting Riven in his full Alpha King regalia, black armor inlaid with silver, a cloak of midnight blue draped over one shoulder, the royal crest gleaming at his throat. The crown of the Alpha King, a circlet of silver fashioned to resemble interlocking wolf fangs, rested on his brow. He paused at the sight of them, something soft and vulnerable flickering across his face, before the mask of kingship returned. "It's time," he said simply. Mira rose, smoothing the folds of her own ceremonial dress, silver-gray silk that shimmered like wolf fur in the moonlight, embroidered with symbols of healing and protection. The garment had appeared in her chambers that morning, along with a note in Riven's hand, "For the mother of the heir, let them see your strength." The journey to the sacred circle took place in solemn procession. Mounted guards led the way, followed by the royal carriage carrying Riven, Mira, and Ash. Behind them came the Heartpack elders, nobles, and selected warriors, a display of strength and unity designed to impress upon the other packs that the Alpha King stood firm. As they traveled through the Central Valley, Mira watched Ash staring out the window, absorbing everything with the intensity that was so characteristic of him. "The sacred circle has stood since the first wolves claimed these valleys," Riven explained, following his son's gaze. 5 great stones, one for each pack territory, arranged around the Alpha Stone at the center. "Like the mountain is the center of all 5 valleys," Ash observed, making the connection immediately. Riven nodded, approval warming his eyes. "Exactly. The Heartpack rules from the center, maintaining balance among all wolves." "Is that why Uncle Dominic wants to be king instead of you?" Ash asked innocently. "Because the center is important?" Mira tensed at the question, but Riven answered without hesitation. "Power is important to your uncle, more important than balance or the good of all wolves." His voice remained even, educational rather than accusatory. "A true Alpha King serves the packs, not himself." "Then I'll be like you when I'm king," Ash decided, the simple loyalty of a child who had only known his father for a matter of days, yet already idolized him. Something complicated passed across Riven's features. Pride, certainly, but also a weight of responsibility that seemed to momentarily bow even his strong shoulders. "You'll be better," he said quietly, reaching out to squeeze his son's shoulder. The carriage slowed as they approached the sacred circle, visible now as a ring of massive stone monoliths, silhouetted against the blood-red moon. Already, the space around it teemed with wolves from all 5 territories, their torches creating a ring of fire that encircled the ancient stones. Riven leaned forward to address Mira, his voice low and urgent. "No matter what happens in that circle, stay close to Ash. If things go wrong, get him to Captain Sarah. She has instructions. Cold fear washed through Mira. You expect treachery? I expect my brother, Riven replied grimly, to try everything in his power to discredit Ash's claim. The carriage came to a halt at the edge of the gathering. When the door opened, the sound of hundreds of conversations died away, replaced by expectant silence as Riven emerged first, his commanding presence drawing all eyes. He turned, offering his hand to help Mira descend, then Ash. The three of them stood for a moment, framed by torchlight and the blood moon above, the Alpha King, the returned exile, and the child who united them. Mira heard the whispers ripple through the crowd, felt the weight of countless stares assessing Ash's features, noting the unmistakable resemblance to his father. Riven placed a hand on Ash's shoulder and began walking toward the center of the circle, his pace measured and unhurried. Mira followed a half-step behind, her head held high despite the murmurs that followed her. She had expected hatred or mockery from those who had once exiled her, but instead found curiosity in many faces, and, more surprisingly, a kind of wary respect. Inside the stone circle waited the leaders of all 5 packs, each standing before their territorial stone. Mira recognized most of them. Alpha Kira of the Lake Pack, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. Alpha Talon of the Ridge Pack, scarred and imposing. Alpha Wren of the Meadow Pack, youngest of the leaders but sharp-eyed and calculating. And Alpha Gregor of the Forest Pack, oldest of them all, his wisdom respected across all territories. And then, opposite Riven's position at the Heartstone, stood Dominic Drake. The resemblance between the brothers was striking, yet deceptive. Where Riven carried his power like a second skin, natural and unassuming, Dominic wore his ambition openly. His golden eyes, so like his brothers, like ashes, burned with barely contained fury as they fixed on the child standing between Riven and Mira. Elder Thaddeus stepped into the center of the circle, leaning heavily on his staff. As head of the Council of Elders, it was his duty to conduct the ritual of the Blood Moon Council. Under the crimson eye of the moon, he began, his voice carrying surprisingly well for one so aged. We gather to address matters of succession within the Heart Pack, which affects all 5 territories united under the Alpha King's rule. He gestured to Dominic, who stepped forward. Up close, Mira could see the barely contained rage tightening his features, the way his fingers curled into fists at his sides. Lord Dominic Drake, second son of the late Alpha King Alaric, has called this council, Thaddeus continued. He contests the legitimacy of the child Ash Vale, recently named heir to the throne by Alpha King Riven Drake. Let all present hear the challenge and the defense, and let the blood moon witness the truth. Dominic's lips curled into what might generously be called a smile, though it held no warmth. My brother returns from a mysterious absence with a child he claims is his heir, he began, addressing the gathered pack leaders rather than Riven directly. A child supposedly born to a woman exiled for barrenness, a woman who was married to another at the alleged time of conception. He paced the center of the circle, his movements predatory. Convenient, is it not, that just as I prepare to claim my rightful place as heir to the throne, as was my position for 7 years while my brother remained childless, suddenly this boy appears. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mira felt Ash press closer to her side, tension radiating from his small frame. The timing is suspect, agreed Alpha Talon, his deep voice rumbling across the circle. But the boy's appearance is not. He has the Drake look. Looks can be deceiving, Dominic countered smoothly, or arranged. The question before this council is not whether the child resembles my brother, but whether he is truly of royal blood, born to the line of succession. And how would you have us determine this? Alpha Kira asked, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp as she studied Ash. Dominic's smile widened fractionally. The old way, the blood test. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the gathered wolves. Mira's hand tightened protectively around Ash's shoulder as she turned to Riven, whose expression had gone utterly cold. The blood test has not been used in generations, Elder Thaddeus protested. It is dangerous, unpredictable. It is also undeniable, Dominic pressed. If the boy truly carries royal blood, he will pass the test. If not, he shrugged, the gesture eloquent in its dismissiveness. What's the blood test, Mama? Ash whispered, looking up at her with confusion. Before Mira could respond, Riven stepped forward, his voice cutting through the growing murmurs. My brother proposes the blood test because he believes it will harm my son, he stated flatly. It requires the child to shift forms repeatedly under the blood moon while his blood is mixed with that of the Alpha King. The magic can be overwhelming for one so young. It would prove beyond doubt that he is your true heir, Dominic countered, false concern dripping from his words. Unless, of course, you fear the result. The trap was neatly laid. To refuse would cast doubt on Ash's legitimacy. To agree was to subject him to an ancient ritual that had fallen out of practice precisely because of its danger to young shifters. I have a counter-proposal, Mira found herself saying, stepping forward before Riven could respond. All eyes turned to her, including Dominic's narrowed gaze. My son has already demonstrated abilities that prove his lineage. The word of an exile means nothing here, Dominic sneered. Then let him demonstrate now, Mira continued steadily, ignoring the jab. Before all assembled, no blood test required. Riven's hand closed around her arm, his grip almost painful. Mira, he warned under his breath. She met his gaze directly. Trust me, she said softly. Trust him. After a long moment, he inclined his head fractionally, releasing her arm. Mira knelt before Ash, who was watching the proceedings with increasing anxiety. Remember what we practiced at home? She asked quietly. How to find your wolf even when you're afraid. He nodded solemnly, the breathing, and thinking about running through the forest. That's right. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I need you to shift now, my brave boy. Show them your wolf. Ash's eyes widened. But father said, Your father agrees, Riven said, kneeling beside Mira. Show them who you really are, son. Ash looked between them, then at the circle of watching faces, before setting his jaw with determination. He stepped away from his parents, into the center of the sacred circle where the light of the blood moon fell most directly. For a moment, he simply stood there, eyes closed, chest rising and falling with deliberate breaths. Then, with a fluidity that belied his age, his form began to change. Bones shifted, fur sprouted across his skin, his face elongating into a muzzle as he dropped to all fours. The transformation was complete in seconds, far faster than adult shifters could manage, let alone children who typically couldn't fully shift until puberty. Where the 6-year-old boy had stood now crouched a wolf pup with fur as silver-white as the moon itself, marked with distinctive patterns that mirrored those on Riven's wolf form. But most striking were his eyes, still the same burnished gold as his human form, glowing with intelligence and power that transcended his youth. Gasps of astonishment echoed around the circle. Even Dominic stood momentarily speechless, his careful composure cracked by genuine shock. A full shift, Elder Thaddeus breathed. At 6 years old. Impossible, one of the other elders whispered. Unless... Alpha Gregor, oldest and wisest of the pack leaders, stepped forward slowly, leaning heavily on his walking stick as he approached the silver wolf pup. Ash held his ground, ears alert, watching the elderly Alpha with cautious respect. I have seen this once before, Gregor said, voice carrying in the hushed circle. When I was a boy, younger than this child is now, the last Alpha King to manifest the gift so young was Alaric himself, father to both Riven and Dominic. He reached out a gnarled hand, which Ash sniffed curiously before allowing the old wolf to touch his head. But this, Gregor continued, wonder in his voice, this is something more. The silver fur is a mark we have not seen in 3 generations. The prophecy spoke of it, a silver wolf born under a red moon, who would unite the fractured packs. Mira's eyes snapped to Riven, whose expression revealed nothing, though tension radiated from his rigid posture. Prophecies are bedtime stories for pups, Dominic scoffed, recovering his composure. A parlor trick proves nothing. Any child can be trained to shift early with the right methods. The implication of unnatural practices hung in the air. Mira stepped forward, fury burning through her veins. You dare suggest I would harm my child? She challenged, her voice carrying across the circle. I, who protected him alone for 6 years while you and your father cast me out as worthless? The raw emotion in her words silenced even Dominic momentarily. Mira continued, addressing not just him but all assembled. You called me cursed and barren, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening. You laughed as I was exiled, all while I carried the true heir within me. a child of such power that he shifted for the first time in my womb, before he was even born. This revelation sent fresh shockwaves through the gathering. Such a thing was unheard of, mythical. Lies, Dominic hissed, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Truth, countered Alpha Kira unexpectedly. I feel it. She approached Ash's wolf form slowly, kneeling before him with respect rarely shown to one so young. The old magic runs strong in this one. Look at his eyes. The knowledge there is not that of a child. As if in response to her words, Ash's wolf form began to glow softly, an internal light that seemed to pulse in time with the blood moon overhead. The assembled wolves murmured in awe as the light spread, creating a faint outline around his small form. The moon blesses him, Elder Thaddeus whispered. See how it responds to his presence. Dominic's face had drained of color, though his expression remained defiant. Tricks and illusions, he insisted. Nothing more. Then perhaps we should proceed with the blood test after all, Riven suggested mildly, though his eyes held a dangerous gleam as they fixed on his brother. If my son's demonstration doesn't convince you, surely ancient magic will. Before Dominic could respond, Ash shifted back to his human form in another display of precocious control. The ceremonial clothes Riven had commissioned transformed with him, specially designed to accommodate the shift. Another indication of the Alpha King's foresight. I'm not afraid of the test, Father, Ash said clearly, his young voice carrying in the hushed circle. I'm your son. I know who I am. Pride swelled in Mira's chest, alongside fear. The blood test was not without risk, but Ash's confidence was unshakable, and tactically, he had just placed Dominic in an impossible position. To continue demanding the test now would make him appear both cruel and cowardly beside a child willing to face ancient magic without hesitation. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he recognized the trap closing around him. Very well, he said through clenched teeth. The child has demonstrated unusual ability, but ability alone does not prove lineage. Many questions remain about the circumstances of his birth, the convenient timing of his appearance. My brother seems fixated on timing, Riven interrupted, addressing the gathered pack leaders directly. Allow me to clarify. 7 years ago, before Lady Vale's marriage to Harris Cole, she and I shared one night together, a truth I would have acknowledged then had I not been away fighting border skirmishes when she was wed. He moved to stand beside Mira and Ash, the three of them forming a united front. When I returned, she had already been exiled on false charges of barrenness. I searched for her, but she had hidden herself well, protecting our son from those who would have used him as a political pawn, or worse. Convenient tale, Dominic sneered, with no witnesses to confirm it. There is one, came a voice from the edge of the circle. The crowd parted to reveal Elder Freya, oldest of the female elders, her white hair gleaming in the moonlight as she stepped forward with slow dignity. I attended Lady Vale during her exile, she said, her aged voice nonetheless clear and strong. I was sworn to secrecy, but with her life and the child's at stake, I must speak. Mira stared in shock. Elder Freya had indeed visited her cottage several times during her pregnancy, offering guidance and herbal remedies, but she had never suspected the old woman had known the truth. Lady Vale came to me in secret before her exile, suspecting she carried a child but uncertain whose it might be, her new husband's, or the result of her night with the then Prince Riven. Elder Freya's rheumy eyes swept the circle. When the child shifted within her womb, I knew. Such power could only come from the direct royal line, not a lesser noble like Harris Cole. You knew, Mira whispered. All this time. Elder Freya inclined her head slightly. It was not my secret to reveal, but I watched over you both from afar, ensuring your protection until the time was right. Conspiracy, Dominic accused, but his words lacked conviction as the tide of opinion visibly turned against him. Truth, countered Alpha Gregor firmly. The child bears the marks of royal lineage, demonstrates abilities that cannot be falsified, and now we have testimony from a respected elder. He thumped his walking stick against the ground decisively. I, for one, am satisfied. The Blood Moon Council recognizes Ash Vale as the true heir to Alpha King Riven Drake. One by one, the other pack leaders voiced their agreement. Alpha Kira, then Alpha Ren, and finally, after a measuring look at Dominic's increasingly desperate expression, Alpha Talon. The council is decided, Elder Thaddeus announced formally. Under the witness of the blood moon, Ash Vale is acknowledged as the true heir to the Heartpack throne and the 5 territories. Dominic's face contorted with rage. This is not over, he snarled, backing away from the circle. The throne is rightfully mine. I won't let a bastard child and his exiled mother steal my birthright. His hand moved to his belt, drawing a dagger that gleamed red in the moonlight. Before anyone could react, he lunged, not at Riven, as might have been expected, but at Ash. Time seemed to slow. Mira saw the blade coming toward her son and moved without thought, throwing herself into its path. But Riven was faster, catching Dominic's wrist in mid-strike, the force of his grip audibly cracking bone. Dominic howled in pain, the dagger falling harmlessly to the ground as Riven forced his brother to his knees. "You would murder a child," Riven said, voice deadly quiet. "My son, your own blood, before the sacred circle and the blood moon itself." Dominic's only answer was a hate-filled glare, his breathing ragged with pain and fury. "The penalty for such treachery is death," Riven continued, drawing his own blade, the ceremonial sword of the Alpha King. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled wolves. Pack law was clear on attempted murder of royal blood. But as Riven raised his sword, Mira found herself stepping forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Not like this," she said softly. "Not before Ash." Riven hesitated, his gaze moving to his son, who stood wide-eyed but unflinching, watching the scene unfold with a gravity beyond his years. "What would you have me do?" Riven asked, genuine uncertainty in his voice for perhaps the first time since she'd known him. "He won't stop. He'll always be a threat." "Exile," Mira suggested, "beyond the 5 territories. Strip him of his rank, his name, his connection to the packs. Let him live with the shame of what he attempted here tonight." For a long moment, Riven considered her words, his blade still raised. Then, slowly, he lowered it. "My son's mother shows you mercy," he told Dominic, voice cold as mountain ice. "Remember that when you walk alone in the wilderness. Remember that kindness came from the woman you helped exile, while your own brother would have gladly taken your head." He released Dominic's broken wrist, stepping back as guards moved in to restrain the disgraced prince. "Dominic Drake, I strip you of your title, your rank, and your place within the Heartpack," Riven pronounced formally. "By the power of the Alpha King and the witness of the Blood Moon Council, you are hereby exiled beyond the 5 territories. Should you return, your life is forfeit." The guards dragged Dominic away, his curses fading into the night. A heavy silence fell over the sacred circle, broken only when Ash stepped forward and took Mira's hand in his small one. "You were right, Mama," he said quietly. "We're stronger when we show mercy." The simple wisdom from a child's lips seemed to release the tension that had gripped the gathering. One by one, the pack leaders approached to formally acknowledge Ash as heir, kneeling before the boy with genuine respect in their eyes. As the ceremony concluded, the blood moon began its descent, its crimson light softening to a more gentle glow. The assembled wolves dispersed gradually, returning to their territories with news that would spread across all 5 valleys by morning. The Alpha King had an heir, one blessed by ancient magic and the moon herself. In the relative privacy of the royal carriage returning to the fortress, Ash finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep against Mira's side. She stroked his hair gently, marveling at his resilience. "You knew," she said to Riven, keeping her voice low to avoid waking their son. "About the prophecy, the silver wolf born under a red moon." Riven's gaze moved to Ash's sleeping form, his expression softening. "I suspected when I first saw him shift. The markings, the timing of his birth. Is that why you claimed him so quickly? Because he fulfills some ancient prediction?" "I claimed him because he is my son," Riven said firmly. "Prophecy or no prophecy, that would never change." Mira studied his face in the dimness of the carriage, searching for deception and finding none. "And now? Now that the pack leaders have seen his power, recognized the signs, what becomes of him?" "That depends partly on you," Riven said after a moment. "He needs his mother. I won't separate you again." The admission cost him, she could tell, not because he didn't mean it, but because the Alpha King rarely admitted needing anything or anyone. "Are you asking me to stay?" Mira clarified. "At the fortress? As what, exactly?" Riven's golden eyes held hers steadily. "As whatever you wish to be. Ash's mother, certainly. The royal healer if you desire to continue your work. He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. My queen, if you could ever forgive enough to consider it. Mira's breath caught. Your queen? We were meant to be mated, Mira. The raw honesty in his voice startled her. That night 7 years ago wasn't a mistake or a passing fancy. I knew it then, but duty called me away. By the time I returned, you were married to another, and then gone. You never came after me, she said softly. I searched, he corrected, for months. But you hid yourself well, and I had a kingdom to run, borders to defend. His jaw tightened. I should have tried harder. I should have found you, found him. The regret in his voice was genuine, Mira realized. Perhaps she wasn't the only one who had spent 7 years wondering about what might have been. I don't expect an answer tonight, Riven continued, reading her hesitation. Or tomorrow, or even this year. But know that the option exists, whenever, if ever, you're ready. Ash stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about wolves and moons before settling again. Mira smoothed his hair back from his forehead, buying time to process Riven's unexpected offer. One step at a time, she said finally. We focus on Ash first, his safety, his adjustment. The rest, she met Riven's gaze directly. The rest we'll figure out as we go. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not the confident smirk of the Alpha King, but something more genuine. As you wish, Lady Vale. As the carriage approached the fortress, now illuminated with celebration lights in honor of the officially recognized heir, Mira felt something shift within her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of healing. The curse that had supposedly tainted her womb had been proven false. The shame of exile had been washed away. The danger that had threatened her son had been confronted and overcome. What remained was possibility. For Ash, for herself, perhaps even for her and Riven. The fortress that had once witnessed her disgrace now welcomed her return not as an exile, but as the mother of the future Alpha King. The blood moon that had once been invoked to condemn her had now blessed her son before all 5 territories. As they passed through the gates, Ash stirred again, blinking up at her sleepily. Are we home, Mama? He asked, the simple question carrying unexpected weight. Mira looked at the fortress rising around them, at Riven watching her with quiet intensity, and finally at her son, her miracle, her silver wolf, her heart outside her body. Yes, little wolf, she said softly. We're home. Perhaps they were. Perhaps, after 7 years of exile and solitude, she had finally found where she truly belonged, not in a cottage at the edge of the territories, hiding from the world, but here, at the heart of it all, standing proudly beside her son as he grew into his destiny. The curse was broken, and in its place, something new began to grow, something that looked remarkably like hope. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps. And if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.